Welcome to another deep dive, listeners. This time we're traveling millions of years back in time, ready to explore, the fascinating world where cutting-edge tech meets ancient history. We're talking paleo-inspired
It's a
robotics.
fantastic field, really. You could almost say it's like, well, using robots to actually conduct paleontological experiments.
That's a great way to put it. And our guide for this journey is, let me see, I've got it right here. A recent review article, it's from Science Robotics. Paleo-inspired robotics as an experimental approach to the history of life. Quite a title. But, get ready, folks, because we are going to discover how researchers are building robots to unlock the secrets of extinct animals and understand key evolutionary transitions.
One of the most compelling things about paleo-inspired robotics is its ability to address those questions that traditional paleontology just can't.
You're right. Like, we look at fossils, right? And we can make, educated guesses about how a dinosaur walked, but using robots, we can actually test those hypotheses.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
paleo-inspired robotics, it builds upon the principles of bio-inspired robotics, taking inspiration from nature, but it goes a step further. Instead of just mimicking living organisms, it aims to understand how extinct species evolved, over millions of years.
So instead of just building a robot gecko that can climb walls, we're talking about a robot dinosaur and using it to understand how its ancestors went from water to land.
That's a great way to put it. And the review article, well, it highlights a fundamental challenge when you study evolution, the ceteris paribus problem.
Yeah.
It's that difficulty of isolating the impact of, well, one specific trait while keeping everything else constant. I mean, think about it. With a living animal, you can't just change one thing without affecting other aspects of its biology.
True. But you can with robots. You can build a robotic model of, an extinct animal and then just tweak a single feature like the size of a fin or the angle of a joint and see how that change impacts its locomotion. It's like having a time machine for evolutionary experiments.
Exactly. And one of the most exciting applications of this is in understanding major evolutionary transitions. For example, well, the move from water to land, that's one of the biggest leaps in the history of life, wouldn't you say? Paleo-inspired robots can shed light on how, those fishy fins transformed into limbs that could support an animal's weight on land.
What's amazing is that scientists are also studying living fish that exhibit walking behaviors like mud skippers and skates to better understand the biomechanics involved.
Yes, and those living examples, they provide valuable insights into how ancient creatures may have, navigated those transitions. And by combining those observations with robotic models, researchers can truly delve into the mechanics of evolution. Imagine, for instance, manipulating the glenoid joint of a robotic fin just to see how its rotation affects stride length and efficiency on land.
That level of control and manipulation, it's just incredible.
Okay, so let's dive into some specific case studies that, showcase the real power of paleo-inspired robotics. This is where it gets really fascinating. Absolutely. The article highlights some fantastic examples, starting with a fish that, well, it acts as a living link to the past. The bichir, also known as Polypterus senegalus, this modern fish, it had these ancient roots, giving us a glimpse into the evolutionary processes that, well, they led to land animals.
So the beacher is like a swimming time capsule, is that what you're saying?
Precisely. And researchers have discovered something remarkable. When bichirs are raised on land, they start to exhibit changes in their locomotion and even in their bone and muscle structure. They develop features that mirror those seen in the fossil record of, well, early tetrapods, the first four-limbed vertebrates.
So you're seeing evolution in action. The bicher's ability to adapt within its lifetime, well, that suggests that this plasticity, it might have been crucial for that water to land transition.
Exactly. It challenges that traditional view that evolution happens solely through, random mutations over long periods. And paleo-inspired robotics offers a way to test this further. Imagine creating a robot bichir and quantifying how changes in its fins and body, how they translate into specific forces and loads on its skeleton as it walks on land. We could literally measure the biomechanics of evolution.
That's a game changer. Okay, on to our next case study. Plesiosaurs, those long-necked marine reptiles, well, they always capture the imagination.
Their unique body plan, it's long puzzled scientists. For years, the assumption was that their long necks, they created significant drag when swimming. But recent studies, well, they've used a combination of computational fluid dynamics and physical models of plesiosaur flippers, and they've challenged that idea.
So those graceful necks weren't a hindrance after all.
It seems not. In fact, the studies suggest that the interaction between the front and hind flippers, they created vortices or swirling water patterns that might have actually, well, enhanced their swimming efficiency.
That's incredible. The plesiosaur's neck, instead of being a drag, might have been an evolutionary asset.
Precisely. And this is where paleo-inspired robots come in again. By building robotic models that, mimic the plesiosaur swimming motion, we can test various hypotheses. Imagine being able to manipulate the flipper shape or neck length and directly observe how those changes affect swimming speed and maneuverability.
It's like we could rewind evolution and watch, those adaptations unfold before our eyes. Okay, ready for another case study. This time we're going to be shifting our focus from bones to footprints, or trackways as scientists call them.
This case study, it highlights how much information can be gleaned from seemingly simple traces of the past. Researchers, they created a soft silicone model. It was of an australopithecus foot. It's a type of theropod dinosaur.
Why a soft foot? Don't we usually just find, well, bones?
That's the point. You see, fossils, they typically only preserve those hard tissues, but soft tissues, the muscles, the tendons, skin, they play a critical role in how an animal moves and leaves those tracks behind.
So by using that soft foot model, they could get a more accurate representation of, well, how a theropod might have actually walked.
Precisely. And when they tested this model, the tracks that it made, well, they matched a previously enigmatic fossilized trackway, helping to confirm that it was likely made by a theropod. It shows just how important it is to consider those often missing soft tissue elements.
That's fascinating. A seemingly small detail can have a significant impact on our understanding of things. And the article, it takes this trackway analysis a step further with Orobatus papsti, an extinct stem amniote.
Orobates, it lived during the early Permian period, about 290 million years ago. And it's thought to be a close relative of, well, the common ancestor of reptiles, birds, and mammals. What makes it particularly interesting is that we have both fossilized skeletons and trackways for this animal.
So we have a pretty good idea then of, well, what it looked like and how it moved around.
Yes. And researchers took advantage of this. They used knowledge of those neural circuits. They control walking in modern salamanders, specifically those, related to a sprawling gait. And they used that to create a robotic model of Orobates.
So they gave a robot Orobates a salamander walking style.
In essence, yes. They programmed the robot to move with a sprawling gait, matching those fossilized Orobates trackways. It's a remarkable example of how we can use knowledge of living creatures to reconstruct the movements of, well, extinct ones, and then verify those reconstructions with that fossil evidence.
It's like bringing the past to life. These case studies, they really showcase the potential here, this potential of paleo-inspired robotics. But what about, the challenges? I imagine there are some hurdles, right? Some hurdles to overcome in this field.
Of course. Just like any other scientific endeavor, paleo-inspired robotics, it faces its own set of limitations. One key issue is the sim-to-real gap. That's the difference between what happens in a simulation or computer model and what actually happens in the real world. Simulations, well, they're simplified representations, so there will always be discrepancies.
So how does this sim-to-real gap affect the robots themselves?
Well, even though we're dealing with physical robots, their design is based on our interpretations of often incomplete fossils. There's, well, always a degree of speculation involved when you're reconstructing an extinct animal, no matter how advanced the technology is.
So we're always working with a bit of a puzzle, is that what you're saying?
Exactly. So the article, it stresses the importance of grounding those robotic reconstructions in solid biological principles, comparing the robot's movements and its biomechanics to those of, well, living creatures with similar features. You see, it helps ensure they're as realistic as possible.
Like making sure our robotic time machine has, a reliable engine. But let's stay optimistic here. What are some of the technological advancements that are driving progress in the field?
There are a few key areas, to highlight. 3D scanning and printing. Well, they've revolutionized the way we study and reconstruct fossils. Those technologies, they allow researchers to create highly detailed and accurate replicas, which are then used to design those robots.
Oh, I've seen some of those 3D printed fossils, and I'll tell you, they're unbelievably realistic. Having a physical model to work from, I mean, that must make that whole design process so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the burgeoning field of soft robotics, which uses, flexible materials to create robots that can, well, they can move and interact with their environment in ways that are, well, more closely resemble living organisms.
So we're moving beyond those clunky metal robots.
Exactly. Soft robotics, it opens up possibilities for creating, artificial muscles and tendons, which bring a whole new level of realism and complexity to these paleo-inspired robots.
It's like giving them the flesh and blood, the flesh and blood they need to truly embody those extinct counterparts.
Precisely. And we can't forget about the role of, well, computation. Advanced algorithms, coupled with, the power of machine learning, are helping researchers not only design and control these robots, but also, simulate how they might have evolved over time.
It's like having a virtual laboratory, I should say, for evolution, where we can run, countless experiments in a fraction of the time that it would take in the real world.
Exactly. We're harnessing the power of computation to help us unravel the mysteries of, well, the past. But even with all of these advancements, there are still some grand challenges to address.
What kind of challenges?
Well, one of the biggest is simply the time and effort involved in building each new generation of robots. That process, it needs to become faster, more efficient, if we want to truly push the boundaries of this field.
It reminds me of, Jurassic Park. They make creating dinosaurs seem so simple, but in reality, it's this meticulously slow and complex process.
A very apt comparison. And then there's the even more ambitious challenge of creating, well, truly evolvable hardware.
Evolvable hardware? What does that even mean?
Well, it refers to creating robots that can physically change, adapt their bodies over time, much like living organisms do through evolution.
Right.
We're talking about robots that can actually evolve.
That sounds straight out of science fiction. But haven't we already, developed robots that can change their shapes? I've seen those robots that can fold themselves into different configurations.
Yes, but those shape-shifting robots you see, they're typically limited to a predetermined set of transformations. They can't generate entirely new forms on their own.
So for truly evolvable hardware, a robot would need to be able to modify its existing structure, even develop, well, entirely new features.
Precisely. It would require a sort of robotic equivalent of DNA, a set of instructions that could be modified and passed down to future generations, allowing them to, adapt and evolve in response to their environment.
Wow, I can't even fathom what that would look like. It would be, well, a revolutionary development in robotics, not to mention, well, paleontology.
Absolutely. And the review article, it suggests that we might be able to draw inspiration from paleontology itself to achieve this goal.
So looking to the past to inspire the future of robotics.
Exactly. By studying how evolution has shaped life on Earth over, well, millions of years,
Right.
we might gain insights into how to design truly evolvable hardware.
It's like those, bio-inspired robots we talked about, taking cues from nature to solve engineering challenges. But in this case, we're drawing inspiration from the entire history of life.
That's a great way to think about it. And this leads us to the broader significance of paleo-inspired robotics collaboration.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right?
Exactly. This field, it thrives on bringing together researchers from various disciplines, paleontologists, biologists, roboticists, computer scientists, to tackle these grand questions about the history of life and the potential of the future.
It's about breaking down those academic silos and creating this dynamic exchange of ideas and expertise. I love that.
It's what makes this field so captivating. We're pushing the boundaries of understanding, not just of the past, but also of what might be possible in the future. It's thrilling to think about the discoveries that await us as we continue to explore this intersection of paleontology and robotics.
It feels like we're on the verge of a new era of paleontological research, where robots aren't just tools, but partners in discovery.
Oh, it truly is an interdisciplinary endeavor, and that's what makes it, so exciting. We're not just building robots, you see. We're forging new ways of understanding the past and even envisioning the future.
It's like we're expanding the scope of paleontology beyond the fossils themselves. We're bringing that ancient world to life through these robotic representations.
Exactly. And those insights we gain, they're not limited to specific, well, dinosaurs or extinct creatures. Paleo-inspired robotics, it's forcing us to think, more broadly about those fundamental principles of evolution, how form and function are intertwined, how life is adapted to, well, an ever-changing world.
It's like looking at the history of life through a new lens, one that can, zoom in on those intricate details of a single species and then pan out to see the grand evolutionary narrative.
That's a great analogy. And that broader perspective, that's what's so valuable. We're not just learning about, how a particular dinosaur walked or how a plesiosaur swam. You see, we're piecing together that larger puzzle of life on Earth.
And maybe, just maybe, by studying the past, we can catch a glimpse of what the future holds.
The article, it touches on that very idea.
Yeah.
It suggests that what we learn from paleo-inspired robotics, well, it could inform the design of, well, robots for the future. Robots that are better adapted to, diverse environments. Robots that can evolve and solve problems in ways that, well, that we haven't even imagined yet.
So it's not just about recreating the past. It's about using the past to, well, inspire the future of robotics.
Precisely. It's a beautiful interplay between science and engineering, where each field informs and enriches the other.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, what's one aha moment for you? One big question that you're left with after exploring this topic?
Well, what truly struck me was, well, the emphasis on plasticity as a driving force in evolution. It's not just about random mutations and survival of the fittest. It's also about, the ability of organisms to adapt and change within their own lifetimes. Like those beavers.
Yeah.
They developed land-walking traits just by being raised on land.
It's as if evolution had a fast-forward button, and these robots, they might be the key to understanding how it works.
Yes. And that brings us to a thought-provoking question for our listeners out there. How might the continued development of paleo-inspired robotics help us understand not just, well, the history of life, but also, its future possibilities? What if we could harness this concept of plasticity to design robots that can truly evolve and tackle the challenges of tomorrow? It's a fascinating concept to ponder, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's enough to make anyone want to go out and build a robot dinosaur. Thanks for joining us on this incredible exploration of, well, paleo-inspired robotics, where the past, the present, and the future, they all converge. Until next time, keep on diving deep.